John chapter 18. And before we get there, let me ask you a question. Have you ever asked yourself, what do I want my life to look like? Who do I want to be? And I'm not just talking to young people in here, because you're challenged by that now. You think, what am I going to do with my life, right? I'm not asking everybody, what are you going to do with your life? I'm saying, what do you want to be? So here's a little poll, okay, audience participation. Who wants to be happy? Not a trick question. Who wants to be happy? Okay, about half of you, good. Who wants to be miserable then? The other half? No. Happy, okay. Who wants to be successful? Good. Who wants to make a difference in this world with your life? Everybody. And so do it, okay? Work hard. The message of the Bible for the Christian is to make your life count for the kingdom of God. And to do that, you have to ask yourself those questions. What do I want to do with my life? Who do I want to be? Who do I want? What will people think about me when I'm gone? What's going to be the legacy that I leave with my kids and my family? When I'm not around, what do my kids and my family say about me? When I'm gone, what do my neighbors think about me? These are questions that are important for a Christian to ask. They're not worldly questions. They're essential questions. So make your life count. Work hard. But it's not easy to make your life count. It's not easy to get to the things that you want to be successful in, and the things that you want to do in your life, and the places you want to go. It's going to take a lot of hard work, and it's going to take time. That's the way that life works. We're so spoiled. We are living in a day of technology, and our third world problems are just silly. Last weekend, we went down to Branson, Missouri, that area down there in the Ozarks. And if you have T-Mobile, just a warning, the coverage isn't the best down there. And so I found myself taking out my phone and trying to get on it, and it was working. And I was trying to find stuff about Silver Dollar City, and it took like 3 seconds. And I was so ticked. I was like, what? It usually takes like a tenth of a second, right? It was taking 3 seconds, and literally I was like, this is so dumb. I hate T-Mobile. We're going to change our phone program. Am I the only one that's ever done that? Okay, I am. And so I was angry at the technology that it wasn't immediate. I mean, the day and age that we live in, everything's immediate. Everything's at our fingertips. I could do all the research for my sermon on my phone now if I wanted to. You can do all the research. And it's such a great thing. What a blessing. We have first world problems. We're rich. Anything that we really want is at our disposal. We point to the ultra rich and we think we're not that rich because we can't go on, our own private jet somewhere. We can't do all these other things. But to the rest of the world, we are the rich people. We can eat whatever we want, pretty much. We can go wherever we want. We can do all the things we want to do. And you're saying out there, well, not me, and I work hard, I barely have any money to spare. Everybody in here is rich compared to the rest of the world. We are. And so when Jesus talks about the wealthy, he's not talking about Elon Musk and Bill Gates in the scriptures. He's talking about you and me. We're the wealthy ones. You're like, well, I don't feel wealthy. I'm with you. I don't either, but we are so blessed beyond measure, and so we have almost anything that we want immediately. The problem with that is the rest of your life doesn't look like that. I mean, things take time, and things are hard. Things are hard to do. If you're playing sports, let's say that you want to be the Forrest Gump of table tennis, okay? You want to be the best table tennis, I don't know why you'd want to be, but you want to be the best table tennis player ever. It's going to take time. It's going to take dedication. You're going to have to work on your game. You're going to have to find your best paddle or whatever you use, and you're going to have to work hard to do it. It's not just going to happen overnight. If you want to be healthy, you don't want to be overweight, you want to be as healthy as possible and live as long as possible, that's going to take hard work. There's just no pill that you're going to take that's going to make you healthy. It just doesn't work that way. I've been monitoring my blood pressure recently, and it's been high. And trust me, I've searched the internet. I've scoured for it. There is not a pill that will help your blood pressure to lower. The hard pill to swallow is I need to lose about 30 pounds, okay? And I know that's hard looking at me. I'm pretty much a specimen, but trust me, I gotta lose 30 pounds. After the first service, my shirt was drenched in sweat. It proved to everybody that I need to lose that weight. So I'm going to do that starting tomorrow. But it's church picnic day. Come on. So there's no magic pill in life. It's not easy. It's going to take hard work. And for you young people especially, although it's never too late for anybody, work hard at your life. Work hard at your job. Work hard at your family. Make the most of the short years that you have. We have a short period of time. Here's what the book of Proverbs says. Proverbs 21:5 says, good planning and hard work lead to prosperity, but hasty shortcuts lead to poverty. If you want to cut the corners, you want to take that magic pill, that's going to lead you to poverty. Good planning, hard work leads to prosperity. Proverbs 13:4 says, lazy people want much, but get little. But those who work hard will prosper. See, it's not that some people don't want the good stuff. Everybody wants it, but only few people get it because they put the time in, the effort in to make a difference, to prosper. Now, that whole little introduction was a disclaimer. A disclaimer is something that's true, even though this other truth is true. So I wanted to say that to start because that is true. So work hard at your life. But there's another truth in our life. It's a difficult one. It's that if you want to live the best life that you can possibly live, you're going to have to come to a place of accepting the will of God for your life. Let me say that one more time. Living your best life also means that you must accept God's will for you. Jesus said it this way in our text. He says, will I not drink the cup that the Father has for me? Drink the cup. That is, go through the thing, in Jesus' case, the cross, his arrest, his murder on the cross. Am I not going to go through that cup? Am I going to drink that? No, I will, because it's God's will for my life, Jesus says. And so we have to come to this reality that there's a part of our life that's under the sovereign will of God. And there's an amount of things that we're going to have to go through. And I just want to give you a heads up about it. As your shepherd, to tell you the truth about it, I don't know what your cup contains, but your cup might contain some very difficult and hard things. And your cup might not contain the things and the hopes and dreams that you have for your life. No matter how hard you work. For example, I wanted to be a professional baseball player when I was a kid. I wanted to. I worked so hard. I did everything I could. But at the end of the day, nobody was looking for a 5'10" pitcher that threw 87 miles an hour. Okay? And that was the reality. And I wasn't going to play professional baseball. Now, that broke my heart. It shattered my dreams. But in whole of life schemes, it was not a big deal. Pretty easy to get over, right? If you go to Hollywood, you're an attractive young man, young woman. You go there, you realize you're not as attractive as you think you are when you get out there. And your facial structures just aren't going to work, okay? And you're not going to be a leading man or a leading woman. You just got to take that. If you're going to be a bodybuilder and you don't have the correct genetics, it doesn't matter how many drugs you take or how many hours you spend in the gym, your cup does not contain Mr. Olympia. It's just the reality, okay? But those things might not be, they might hurt, but in the whole life scheme, we understand those things. But there's other things that are harder and more difficult to take. Other things in your cup that you're going to have to drink it. Here's the thing. We all drink the cup that God has for us, his will, but it's only those who accept it, find the joy in life. If you don't accept it, it doesn't change the fact that God's will is the same for you. Do we get that? So God has his will. He has a cup for you to drink. You're going to drink it whether you want to or not. So the best possible life is to drink it and accept it and find joy in it rather than fight it and try to run from it, which you'll never do anyway. Let me give you 3 things that your cup will contain. I don't know how much, but it will contain these things, and we see it in the text here. First, and they're difficult. The first one is your cup contains suffering. Your cup contains suffering. Jesus is here. He's facing his arrest. He's been talking about it to his disciples. They've been sad about it. He's been telling them that he has to go away. He's been telling them he has to die. And he's told them this. And they don't accept it. They don't like it. They don't understand it. They don't understand in their mind why their Messiah would be arrested and be killed. It doesn't make any sense. It didn't fit their paradigm of what a Messiah was. Their Jewish Messiah that they had grown up learning about since they were in Sunday school was this man that was going to come as God's representative and bring the kingdom of God onto earth. And this man, the Messiah, was going to rule the nation of Israel and kick the Romans out. There'd be no other country that could stand against Israel because the Messiah would be on the throne, and it would be the kingdom of God that would spread across the whole planet. That was their idea of the Messiah. And now Jesus is saying, I got to be arrested and I got to be murdered. And so this is what is ahead for Jesus. All throughout the Gospel of John, we've read about this. It's the hour that Jesus came for. He did great things. He healed people. He did miraculous things. But the hour of his life that mattered the most was his death, burial, and resurrection. And so here's what's to come for him. His arrest right here. He's being arrested. Judas comes, one of Jesus' friends, leading this band of soldiers to him. Verse 3. John doesn't tell us that Judas kissed him, but the other synoptic gospels tell us that. And they come with torches and weapons and lanterns, and they come to arrest Jesus. He's going to be humiliated. He's going to be put on trial by people who claim to speak for God, the Pharisees. He's going to be spat upon. He's going to be punched. He's going to have his beard ripped out. He's going to be nailed onto a cross, hung there naked in shame before an audience until he dies from asphyxiation from the suffering. Not only that, even worse, he's bearing your sin and my sin, the sin of the world, on himself. This is the cup that he drank. But you remember in the other Gospels, as he's praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, even for Jesus, the Son of God, it wasn't easy. He prayed to God, his Father. He said, Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. He's saying, if it's possible, I don't want to drink this cup. Can we do it another way? But then he said, but not my will, but your will be done. And I kind of see that in the text here. I don't know if you caught it on the story, but when they come to arrest Jesus, and I could be imagining this, but when they come and they surround him and they ask him, are you Jesus of Nazareth? He says, I am. Now right away, the phrase that he uses, I am, for all of us who have been in the Gospel of John, we remember that he used that several chapters before in a way that showed that he was equal with God the Father. He uses the same word that God spoke from the burning bush to Moses, I am who I am. And the book of Isaiah is loaded with God speaking in this way, that I am who I am. And Jesus said it earlier in John, and now he says it again. Are you Jesus of Nazareth? He doesn't just say, yeah, that's me. He says, I am. It's a loaded statement. And right away, when he first says that, they fall back, John says, they fall away. Could it be that even in the moment of Jesus' agony, understanding that he's going to have to drink this cup of suffering, that maybe a little ounce of his power just kind of poured out and the people were knocked down? I mean, maybe he just, there's a little temptation there just to wipe them all out. That's not from the Lord. That's from me. I'm just reading the text, looking at that. Now, Peter, he brings out his sword because he wants to defend against Jesus' arrest, and we'll see some more of that later. But here's the application. This thing was happening to Jesus not because he didn't live a good life, because he lived a perfect life. These things were happening. The suffering that happened because it was God's will for him. So here's the thing that's a problem for us, and here's what we tend to do. Or I won't even say you, I'll say me. Here's what I tend to do. I seem to think that my suffering in life is going to correlate to how I live my life. Now, there's some truth to that, right? So if I choose to sin, I choose to suffer. And if others sin against me, I will also suffer. So there's some correlation. But do you know that there's not a total correlation? Actually, there's not much of a correlation other than your own sin and people sinning against you. that the way that you live your life will affect how much suffering you have. We learned that from Job. Job was a righteous man, a godly man. He did everything right, and yet he had all this cup of a suffering poured upon his life. He lost his kids, he lost his wealth, he lost his health. He lost everything. Why? Did he deserve it? No. Why? Because he was living a rotten life? No. He did it, and he never knew why it was happening, but he went through it because God was challenged by the devil to see if anybody could love God for no reason at all. The devil actually said to God, is it true that you think anybody would really love you unless you just did stuff for them? That's why they love you, God, because you give them everything. And God says, have you considered Job? He's my man. Even if he has nothing, he won't leave me. So it was this challenge happening in heaven that resulted in the suffering of Job. By the way, Job never found that out in his life. He found it out probably in heaven when he got up there. God, what's the deal? Like what happened? Well, here's the rest of the story, Job. So suffering doesn't necessarily correlate with the way that you live your life. We can point to people who are great sinners who have wonderful lives. We can point to people who were great saints and they suffered greatly in their life. We don't know necessarily why there is suffering for us. Let me read you a couple of scriptures. These will help us to focus not on the reason why we suffer, which we tend to do, but rather the purpose of why we suffer. Romans 5:3 says, we also glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Glory in your sufferings? Glory in it? Why would you glory in it? Why would you like? Because it's producing something in your life. It's producing endurance, perseverance. James 1 says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. For the writers of the New Testament and the suffering that they were experiencing, it had a purpose. They didn't necessarily ask why or what was the reasoning behind it or did I do something wrong to deserve it. They left the reasoning up to God. But they knew that God's will had allowed it, and so they looked at it as a good thing. Now, it's not that we would desire to suffer, right? Oh, please let me suffer. I just want to hurt. No, it's not that. But it's when that happens, we would turn to God by faith and say, God, I trust you. I don't know what it is, but you're doing something in this cup of suffering. Here's the second thing, and this is what God is doing. Your cup contains sanctification. Sanctification. The primary purpose of your suffering is your sanctification. Sanctification, what's that? It's the action or process of being freed from sin. It's the action or the process of being freed from sin and being made holy. And that's what every Christian is called to do, is to be freed from sin in a process called sanctification. Now, we call it a process because it doesn't mean that once you become a Christian, you just don't sin. It doesn't mean that. I mean, before coming to Christ, I used to cuss at a drop of a hat. But since coming to Christ, it takes a lot longer than that. So, understand? Yeah, Sam got it. Yeah. So here's the idea, is it's a progressive thing. You grow in your sanctification. It's not an overnight thing. It's why we come to communion and we examine ourselves every month. We examine ourselves all the time because we're a work in progress. How many people are a work in progress? Turn to your neighbor and say, you're a piece of work. Okay. Peter was the one that we see in our text this morning who sanctification is on display. Peter was the one in Matthew chapter 16, verse 22. He actually pulled Jesus aside when Jesus was talking to his disciples about being arrested, just this thing that was going to happen. He was saying, I got to be arrested. I got to go die on the cross. And Peter's like, no, Jesus. Pulled Jesus aside. He said, Jesus, don't talk like that. You're the Messiah. That's not for the Messiah to do. And what did Jesus say to Peter at that moment? Anybody remember? Just call it out. Get behind me, Satan. Peter was well-meaning, well-intentioned, but he was saying things that were from the devil, that Jesus wouldn't go through with the cup of suffering that was given to him. Peter was growing in his faith, growing in his sanctification. He says in Matthew 26, verses 33, Peter says to Jesus, if all these other disciples, if all these other guys give up, I won't give up. If they all fail you, I won't. I'm your man. And it seems like he is the man here in chapter 18 because he brings his sword out and he cuts the guy's ear off. And Jesus says, no, Peter. Peter didn't get it. He didn't understand that Jesus had to drink the cup that was given to him, just like you got to drink your cup. Next week we see Peter denies Jesus. He falls deeper away from him. And it's a process for Peter. And here's the thing. We all have to go through this process as Christians. Some at different points in our life, some at different speeds, but we all have to grow. If we don't grow, there's a problem. If you call yourself a Christian and you're not growing in your faith, that's a red flag. I saw this documentary this past week about these two boys who were regressing. They're called the Benjamin Button brothers. Benjamin Button was a movie where the guy, he aged backwards. When he was young, he was really old, and then he grew old and he looked young. And so they call these brothers. They have a super rare disease, both of them. They grew up normal lives till their mid-20s, and then they regressed. And year by year, they're going back to being little kids. And so they grew up, they got married, they had kids, and now they're back living at home with their mom and dad. And I jotted down what the mom said. It was so sad. She said, I used to wish my boys would stay young forever. Well, I guess I got my wish, she said. It's sad. I mean, we all understand it. I love when our kids were little. They're such precious times, but if they don't grow up, there's something wrong. Same for Christians. If we stay a person of faith at the same level as when we first prayed to the Lord to forgive us for our sins, and we don't go any further than that, that's a problem. Your cup contains sanctification. The last one, your cup contains, and this is a good one, it's easier, I think, contains salvation. Salvation. Now this is for the Christian. Actually, everybody will have a cup of suffering at some level. But for the Christian, your cup contains sanctification. And for the Christian, your cup contains salvation. For Jesus, the hour had come. He's going to go to the cross. He's going to die, but he's going to be raised from the dead. That's coming. It's right around the corner. And because of his death on the cross and his resurrection, you can experience salvation. You can be saved. There was a purpose to what happened to Jesus. It was so that there could be good news for humanity. It's so that you could be forgiven. It's so that you could have hope, even past the grave, so that you could have abundant life, the best possible life, that you could realize and understand how the universe was set into place, that God is on the throne, he's number one, and he's got to be number one in your life too. You can refuse him, but that's not the best possible life. You're going to always falter and struggle until you come to know that God is on the throne. And Jesus made a way for you to know him by dying for your sin, for getting rid of the sin that would separate you from God. And so if you believe in him, by grace you're saved through faith. Salvation happened because of what Jesus did. Now we don't see this here in this text. It's actually Peter's descent. But Peter's salvation is also coming. Peter's salvation is going to come after Jesus rises from the dead. Peter meets with Jesus. Jesus restores him back. And Peter goes on to become one of the first men who turned the world upside down for Christ. And the church is started and grows because of the work of Peter. And Peter goes and he dies. He actually suffers and dies for Jesus. But he achieved salvation. Peter writes in 1 Peter 3:14, even if you suffer for what is right, you are blessed, he said. Peter came to a part of salvation where he suffered. He suffered greatly. He was crucified upside down. He says, if you're crucified, if you're beaten, if you're persecuted, even for the good, for what's right, you are blessed. How could Peter say that? Because he experienced the salvation of God. It's an awesome thing. Have you experienced the salvation of God? Are you trusting in Jesus? Have you come to that point and you've realized that you're a sinner and that you need to be saved? That's the first step. Some of us don't even get to that first step. We point to the people around us that are worse than us, and that makes us feel better about our life. And so I can always point to people who are worse than me, and you point to them to say, I'm not that bad. But the reality is, God doesn't use that measure to measure you. The measure that He uses is His Son, Jesus, who is perfect. So how do you measure up to perfection? And when you realize that you don't measure up, you're going to need help to measure up. And the help comes only from God Himself, and it comes through the cross. It comes from you surrendering your life. It doesn't come from you working as hard as you can. It doesn't come from you trying to outdo the person next to you in good works. It comes when you accept by faith that Jesus died for you. Have you accepted that? I'm not asking if you're perfect or not, but what have you done with Jesus? What do you believe about Jesus? What you believe about Jesus matters for your salvation. And you might not think much of it now, but there's coming a day where you're going to stand before God and give an account for your life. And if you don't have Jesus, you're in a heap of trouble. Your cup then will not contain salvation. Your cup will contain damnation. I mean, how can you say that, Pastor? We don't talk about damnation or condemnation. That's not very loving. No, what's not loving is not to mention it until a person gets there and it's too late. Be saved today. You say, how can I be saved? Just call out to Him. I believe in you, Jesus. You died for my sins. Forgive me for my sin. Save me. And in that moment, He'll save you and change you forever. And He'll help you then when you have to drink the cup that He has prepared for you. I don't know how much suffering your cup has, but He'll give you the strength to get through it. One of my favorite verses, I'll close with this, is from Isaiah chapter 43. Some of you might know this verse, and maybe some of you memorized it. It is a great verse, a good one to memorize. God speaking, He says, "Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you." God's going to be with you. It's hard for us to think about it in this moment, and we think about the suffering that we may or may not face. It's hard to see that God's going to be there. But He will. He promises to be there for His people. Notice He doesn't say that you're not going to pass through the waters. He says you will. He doesn't say that they won't overwhelm you. He says you'll pass through them, but they won't overwhelm you. He says when you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned. He doesn't say that He's going to stop the rivers from overflowing all over you. He doesn't say He's going to put out the fire. He says, I'll be there in the midst of it. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, 3 young men, they were taken prisoner and captive by the Babylonians, and they loved God. They followed God. They were young men of conviction. And King Nebuchadnezzar built a big idol, and he said, everybody's got to bow down and worship this idol. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, no, we will not do that. We worship the one true God, Yahweh. And so word spread around that they weren't doing what King Nebuchadnezzar had said, and so they were threatened to be arrested and threatened with their own death, and they said, that's fine. If we die, we die, but we can't go against our God. He said, okay, great, have fun in the fire. And they tossed them into the fire. And Nebuchadnezzar looked down into the fire, and he saw the 3 standing in the fire, but then he saw the one more. Another person. Looks like the Son of God. He was the Son of God. Pre-incarnate Christ. Jesus was there. God with them in the fire. He promises to be in the fire for you. Your cup, I don't know what it is. It contains suffering. But God says, I'll be there. Lord, help us to trust in Him when we face our times. You know, Dwight, when he was first finding out things that were going on health-wise, I just was so blown away by how he doesn't seem bothered by it. And it just, I couldn't believe it. And I asked him if he was worried about it. And I told some of you guys this before, but he says, I'm trusting God. I'm ready. And that night I just remember praying, God, if I face news like that, please let me respond in the same way that Dwight did. That's a man of God. God says, I'm not going to save you, take you out of the river. I'm not going to stop the fire, but you can bet I'll be right beside you in it.